Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Eh.
Today we're doing something a little different. We're going to travel back in time, essentially, to witness one very specific, very chaotic, and I got to say, very funny moment in paranormal history.
I like this already.
So I want you to just, picture the scene. It's Tuesday, September 21st, 1965.
Okay, very precise. A specific entry point.
Exactly. We're in Elmira, New York. It's about 9:03 p.m., and the atmosphere it's really crucial here. It's hot. It's one of those humid, sticky nights.
Right, the kind where the air just feels heavy.
Yes, and this is way before central air was standard, in every suburban house. So the windows are wide open. They're just desperate for any kind of breeze.
Which, as we're about to find out, becomes a major tactical error later in the evening.
A huge tactical error. So inside this apartment, you've got our usual players, Rob Butts and his wife, Jane Roberts. But tonight, they have a guest, a friend of theirs named John Bradley. And normally when we talk about this material, we're digging into, high-level philosophy or the nature of consciousness. But tonight is more like a supernatural thriller meets a sitcom.
It really is. It's the episode where the spirit world gets a little too rowdy for the suburbs.
Wow.
We're building towards a moment where the channeling gets so loud, so physically intense, that the neighbors actually come knocking to see if everyone is okay.
It's the ultimate clash of the esoteric and the mundane. But okay, before we get to the neighbors and the very awkward explanations, let's just set the ground rules here.
Good idea.
This isn't a lecture. We're taking a deep dive specifically into session 190. That's from the early sessions, book 4 of the Seth material.
And right at the top, we should probably make our standard disclaimer.
Yep.
This deep dive is distributed completely free of charge. You'll find it on all major platforms, and it's for educational purposes. We're here to explore the material, analyze the history, and really just look at the data.
We're not here to preach or convert.
Absolutely.
And our source material today is, again, session 190, recorded on September 21st, 1965. This is all published by the New Awareness Network.
Right.
And if you find this conversation fascinating, and I promise we really, really encourage you to go to sethcenter.com/layer, the early sessions.
Please do.
Pick up the books, read the raw data for yourself.
Yeah, there is no substitute for the primary source, especially with Rob's notes in the margins. You really need to see those to get the full picture.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the vibe of this evening. Like I said, it's hot. They have a guest, John Bradley. And what are they doing? They're not, holding a seance with candles or anything.
No. It's actually kind of technical. They're listening to a tape recording.
Right.
And the context here is key. John Bradley was a friend, but he was also, let's say, a bit of a skeptic. Or at least he hadn't seen the full show yet.
What do you mean by the full show? He'd seen sessions before, hadn't he?
He had, but he'd only ever witnessed what you might call the quiet version of Seth.
The quiet version.
Yeah. In the very early days, the delivery could vary wildly. Sometimes Seth, the personality Jane Roberts channeled, was very conversational, almost soft-spoken. He'd dictate the material, kind of like a professor giving a lecture.
Okay, so John had seen that.
Oh.
And he thought it was interesting, maybe a bit dry.
Exactly. He hadn't seen the energy really ramp up.
So Rob and Jane are trying to prove a point. They're playing a reel-to-reel tape of a previous session, session 170, just to show John, hey, listen to this. Listen to how strong the voice got a few weeks ago.
They wanted to demonstrate the range. And Jane is actually on her knees right in front of the tape recorder, trying to find the specific spot on the reel where the voice changes.
It's such a domestic scene. You can almost hear the whir of the tape, feel the humidity in the air. It's all just so normal.
Until it's not.
And this is where it gets chilling. The tape is playing. Seth's voice is coming out of the speakers. A voice from weeks ago. And suddenly, Jane, the real Jane, right there in the room, she just closes her eyes. She switches the recorder off.
Yeah.
And instantly, without missing a beat, she starts speaking as Seth.
Talk about a dramatic entrance. It's like a disruption of time. You have the recorded voice, and then the live voice just takes over the exact same space. It's seamless.
And the line she delivers, or I should say the line Seth delivers, is just classic. He bursts through and says, why settle for a recording when you can have the real thing?
That is fantastic. It's so meta. You have this energy essence personality interrupting a tape recording of himself to basically say the live show is better.
It shows this level of awareness and, frankly, humor that you just don't usually associate with channeled material.
Right.
I think the public expects, doom and gloom or this very stiff, almost biblical language like, hark, I am here.
Yeah, not a witty comeback about the recording medium itself.
Exactly. But here, Seth is cracking a joke.
And it establishes his personality immediately. He's not some robot. He's not a vague spirit. He's witty, he's present, and he is dominant. Rob even notes that the transition was so smooth, it took them a second to realize they weren't listening to the tape anymore.
Wow.
Jane's voice was just strong right from the very start.
So this really marks a shift in the evening. It feels like Seth has taken John's presence as a kind of challenge.
Like, oh, you want to see the real thing? Okay, here it is.
Right. But before the volume gets, completely out of control, Seth actually gets down to business. And this is another thing I just love about these early sessions, the practical life advice.
It's not just the universe is expanding, it's, should I buy this bar?
Literally. That's literally the question. John Bradley is having a bit of a midlife career crisis. He's working in sales, but he's thinking about quitting his job to buy a restaurant and bar in his hometown, Williamsport, Pennsylvania.
It's the classic American dream, isn't it? Be your own boss, own a local spot, settle down.
Everyone's had that thought at some point. I'll just open a little quiet place.
Mm-hmm.
So he asks Seth for his opinion. Now, if you went to some generic fortune teller, you might get something really vague like, I see dark clouds over the bar, or follow your heart.
Right, something useless.
But Seth gives him a full psychological profile.
This is where the depth comes in, and where the specific insight is just so valuable. Seth advises against the move, but his reasoning is fascinating.
Okay.
He doesn't say the business will fail. In fact, he explicitly says if John bought it, it would be a financial success.
Wait, so he says it would be a success, but he still shouldn't do it. That sounds contradictory.
It does, right. Usually, if a business is going to make money, the advice is go for it.
Yeah.
But it's only contradictory if you think money is the only metric for success. Seth isn't looking at the balance sheet, he's looking at John's psyche.
Okay, so what does he see?
He tells John that he has a deep-seated need for two things: security for his family and what he calls cosmopolitan outlets.
Cosmopolitan outlets. That's a very specific phrase. What does he mean by that?
He implies that John needs to be out in the world. He needs the stimulation of travel, of meeting new people, of moving around different territories. Seth argues that while the bar would make money, Jay would feel trapped by this settled establishment.
That is surprisingly insightful. It's like high-level career coaching.
Exactly.
It's basically, yes, you can do the job, but will the job make you miserable? It reminds me of people today who think they want to work from home, but then they realize they actually miss the office interaction.
Precisely. Seth points out that his current sales, work, traveling, meeting clients, that satisfies his psychological need for movement and interaction. If he becomes a proprietor, he's stuck in one building, night after night.
He'd essentially be building his own prison.
A profitable prison, but a prison nonetheless. Seth frames it as a conflict between John's need for security and his need for freedom. The bar offers security, but it kills the freedom.
And Seth doesn't just stop with the psychoanalysis rights. He makes some very specific predictions about John's current employer, Searle Drug.
Right. John was planning to leave in January. Seth predicts that no changes will occur at the organization until the following February. He gives him a timeline.
And Rob adds a note here that I think is really important, especially for the skeptics, or at least for the context of the continuity of this material.
Yes. Rob notes that Seth references data about Searle Drug, its financial stuff, its personal entanglements, that had been given in sessions over a year prior.
Over a year?
Yeah, we're talking about information that's scattered through session 37, session 54, 63, going all the way back.
So just to be clear on the mechanics here, Jane, in her normal waking state, would have to remember specific details about her friend's company from a year ago. Details that were probably buried in hundreds of pages of handwritten notes she hasn't even looked at.
That's the implication. It suggests a continuity of memory in the Seth personality that exists completely independent of Jane's conscious recall.
So Seth remembers everything he's ever told John, even if Jane has completely forgotten it.
Exactly. It's a subtle form of evidence, but it's a strong one. It creates this sense of a distinct, coherent mind that's holding on to all this data. It's not just, random firing of neurons.
It's an organized consciousness.
Correct.
So we have career counseling. But then the session takes a hard turn into the medical. And this is the part that gave me goosebumps when I was reading it.
The bone sliver incident.
The bone sliver. Okay, let's unpack this because you have to understand the timeline. John asks a question about a very specific event. He asks if Seth knows what the trouble was when he had a pain in his throat on June 17th, 1964.
And again, notice the dates. The session is September 1965. John is asking about a random sore throat from 15 months ago.
Right. It's so random. And here's the backstory. On June 17th, 1964, John had this pain. The very next day, June 18th, Jane had tried one of these psychological time experiments.
For anyone new to that term, psychological time is a specific exercise Seth taught them. It's about altering your perception to sort of step outside of linear time and access intuitive information.
Like a kind of disciplined meditation.
That's a good way to put it.
So back in 1964, Jane is doing this exercise, and she has this startling experience. She hears a thunderous voice tell her that John's trouble is a bad tongue.
A bad tongue?
Which at the time made zero sense. John's throat hurt, his tongue was fine. It seemed like nonsense or some weird metaphor.
Yeah, like maybe he was gossiping too much, hold your tongue, that kind of thing.
Right. But now, in session 190, Seth clears it all up. He explains that the voice Jane heard back then was him. And he reveals the diagnosis. It wasn't a sore throat. John had cut his tongue on a bone sliver while he was eating.
A bone sliver?
Yes. And here's the anatomy lesson. Seth explains that because of the specific nerve structure in that part of the body, the pain from the cut on the tongue was felt as referred pain down in his neck.
That is wild.
Isn't it? It connects the dots perfectly. The bad tongue message wasn't wrong at all. It was anatomically precise. John felt it in his throat, but the actual injury was to the tongue.
It's that aha moment. It takes something that sounded like vague, psychic, gibberish, bad tongue, and grounds it in physiological reality.
And the fact that Seth pulls this out from over a year ago, it just really adds to that credibility of the independent personality theory we were just talking about.
It certainly makes it harder to dismiss as just subconscious rambling. Subconscious rambling isn't usually that anatomically specific about a 15-month-old injury. It's the kind of detail that makes you sit up and pay attention.
Okay, so John is getting great advice. He's getting his medical mysteries solved. But John just can't help himself. He decides to poke the bear.
He does. He makes a remark. He basically asks for proof of Seth's existence.
The classic skeptic's error. If you're real, prove it.
And Seth, who you have to remember, started this whole session by saying, why settle for a recording when you can have the real thing? He decides to demonstrate exactly what the real thing looks like.
The text says Seth lit into him.
Oh, he did. Seth starts using voice effects and a volume that Rob describes as physically impossible for a woman of Jane's makeup to produce normally.
We have to remember, Jane Roberts was a petite woman. She wasn't an opera singer with some massive chest cavity. She was small. She was slight.
But the voice coming out of her now is just booming. And Seth's argument is brilliant. He completely turns the tables. He says he could just as legitimately insist that John prove his existence.
Which is a philosophical mic drop, right? It's like, I'm talking to you, you're talking to me. Why am I the one who has to prove I exist? It's very Cartesian. Cogito, ergo sum.
But he doesn't just argue philosophically. He gets physical. Rob describes Jane's eyes being open, staring deliberately at him.
This is the part that makes me laugh, honestly. Rob is just sitting there, and he knows the windows are open. He knows the neighbors are just a few feet away. And Jane, as Seth, is looking right at him, knowing he's embarrassed, and getting louder on purpose.
Yes. Seth is described as frisky and enjoying himself. He loves having an audience. He sees Rob squirming, worrying about a noise complaint, and he just cranks the volume up to 11.
Rob writes, "It was far too loud for the house, in my opinion, with others living so close." And Jane even stands up and tips her head back to project her voice even more.
And Seth comments on it. While he's shouting, he says, "I'm using this position to attain more power." He's literally explaining his vocal technique while he's yelling at them.
It's incredible theater. You've got this petite woman, head thrown back, just bellowing into the humid night air of Elmira, New York, "Prove my existence!"
And Rob is just shrinking into the sofa, hoping the earth will swallow him whole.
And that is when it happens. The climax of the evening.
A knock at the door.
The dreaded knock.
Rob says the voice reached a startling level, and then suddenly, bam, 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 on the door.
And what happens to Jane in that exact second?
She snaps out of it, instantly. The moment the knock happens, the trance is broken. It's like flipping a light switch.
Okay, now just put yourself in their shoes. You're Rob Butts. You have just spent the last hour listening to a disembodied personality shouting at your friend about his career and his tongue. And now you have to open the door to your neighbors.
And not just any neighbors, the Taylors. A nice young couple, newly arrived in town. They don't know about Seth. They don't know about Seth. They don't know Jane is a medium. They just know they live 70 feet away and they heard something.
Something loud. So Rob opens the door, and there stand the Taylors. And they brought their cat.
Which is such a weird, perfect detail. They were so concerned, or maybe just so confused, that they brought the cat with them.
Or maybe the cat just followed them out. But it just adds to the total absurdity of the scene. You have the neighbors, their cat, Rob, Jane, and John Bradley all standing in this hot living room.
The Taylors then explained that they checked all 8 TV stations.
8 stations. That was a lot back then.
They went through every single channel to see if the voice was coming from some broadcast. And when they couldn't find it on TV, they thought Rob and Jane were in trouble. Donna Taylor specifically thought something bad was happening.
So Jane tries to joke it off. She says, oh, it must have been the TV.
But the neighbors aren't buying it. They checked the TV. That excuse is dead in the water.
So Rob has to think fast. He is the master of the quick cover story here. He says, it was an experiment in self-hypnosis for Jane's book.
Which, to be fair, isn't a complete lie. Jane was writing a book on ESP, and this was a trance state.
It's a brilliant half-truth. Self-hypnosis. It sounds just scientific enough to be plausible, but weird enough to explain the shouting.
And the neighbors accept it. They're mystified, for sure. But they buy the explanation. They end up staying for 30 minutes.
And the whole time, poor John Bradley is sitting in the corner, trying not to just explode with laughter.
Can you blame him? He just got shouted at by a ghost, and now he's watching the neighbors politely discuss self-hypnosis while their cat starts playing with Willie, the Roberts cat.
It's the perfect grounding wire for the whole event. You have this high-strung, supernatural moment, and it ends with 2 cats playing on the living room rug and polite conversation about hypnosis.
It just reminds us that these people, Rob and Jane, they are living very normal lives despite this extraordinary thing happening to them. They worried about the neighbors, they worried about rent, they had cats.
Makes this story so much more believable to me. If this were fiction, the police would have kicked down the door or the neighbors would have been terrified. But in reality, it's just awkward.
It's social awkwardness, the true horror of the suburbs.
Exactly. Now, before we wrap up, we should probably look at this from Jane's perspective, because this session was unique for her too.
Yes. Usually Rob is the one taking the notes during the session, but because this one was so unscheduled and chaotic, Jane actually wrote the reconstruction of the session herself 2 days later.
And what did she remember of it?
She recalled the feeling of power. She says she felt 0 fatigue, despite all that physical exertion. I mean, shouting for an hour would normally leave you exhausted. But she felt energized.
She said she was fully involved in the role and thoroughly enjoying it.
It suggests that the energy of the personality of Seth was actually sustaining her. It wasn't draining her reserves, it was flowing through her. This really aligns with the energy exchange theory they talk about in the later books, that contact with these larger personalities is actually vitalizing, not depleting.
And there's a little teaser for the future in this session, too. We mentioned the practical advice, but Seth also drops a hint about the scientific validation that was coming.
Right. John asks about finding a typist for all this material, and Seth mentions that a Dr. InStream would help them out later.
And this connects to the image we have in the show notes for this deep dive. It's a tracing of a money order.
Yes, a U.S. postal money order for $2. It seems so mundane, but it's part of the envelope tests.
Tell us about that. Why are they tracing money orders?
Well, Seth had mentioned new experiments with Dr. InStream involving clairvoyance. The goal was to provide valid information that could be tested scientifically, to keep the interest of observers like Dr. InStream.
So they weren't just sitting around chatting. They were actively trying to prove the phenomenon.
Exactly. They would do things like seal a money order or some specific object in an envelope, and Jane, in a trance, would have to describe what was inside without seeing it. This session 190, it really sets the stage for that. It shows the shift from just philosophical dictation to let's run some lab tests.
It shows they were serious about understanding what this was. They weren't just true believers, they were investigators of their own experience.
Which is a healthy way to approach any of this. Skepticism is fine, but open-minded investigation is better.
So what does this all mean? We have a night that starts with a tape recording and ends with a neighbor's cat.
I think the takeaway is the integration. The spiritual isn't something that happens on a mountaintop somewhere. It happens in a humid living room in Elmira. It interrupts your tape recording. It wakes up the neighbors.
And the Seth personality. He's not some dusty old library book. He's funny. He's loud. He's embarrassed for Rob. but he does it anyway because he has a point to prove.
And he's precise. That bone sliver detail proves that there is information coming through that is accurate and specific, not just vague generalities.
It really challenges you to think about the nature of consciousness.
Yeah.
If a personality can be so strong that it physically alters the voice of a petite woman and projects it across two lawns, I mean, where does that energy even come from?
And as Seth asked John, can you prove your existence any better than a voice in the night? It's a question that really stays with you.
It certainly does. I'm going to be thinking about that bad tongue diagnosis all week.
And checking my food for bone slivers.
Definitely. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into session 190. And again, if you want to read the full account, and trust me, there's so much more detail in the books, please visit sethcenter.com to the early sessions.
Yeah, support the publisher, New Awareness Network. They're the ones keeping this material alive. It is absolutely worth the read.
Thanks for listening. And remember, if you hear shouting next door,
It's probably just self-hypnosis.
try to keep it down for the neighbors tonight. See you next time.